It's time for Southern Fried Baseball, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Jake McKeever as he talks everything SEC baseball and more.
Welcome in, College Baseball Central fans of the SEC, as we return through our deep dive series into episode 6. We head as far north as we're going to get in the SEC, to the Bluegrass State, to take a deep dive into the Kentucky Wildcats. They're a team that really flew under the radar the entire season in 2022. A lot of people weren't very high on them. 2023 was really kind of their coming out party for them. And then last year, breaking through, going all the way to Omaha, ending up as one of the final 6 teams as they won a game in Omaha. Was really an impressive season for Kentucky and Mangione and company, but they are replacing a ton. There's a ton of unknowns for this team. But before we jump into that, let's go ahead and get into the kind of fluff pieces of it. Like I said, here is Kentucky. They're a team that went to Omaha last year. They got a little bit of a lighter regional, but they were the 2 overall seed. Took out Illinois, took out Indiana State. And then they welcomed a very talented Oregon State team in, beat them 10-0 first game. Second game with Oregon State season on the line, took them down then as well. Lot to like about this Kentucky program in the state that it is in. It is, I think, one of the most up-and-coming programs in the entire country. Here is where we rank Kentucky Proud Park. It comes in at number 3 in our SEC stadium rankings, behind Baum Walker, behind Plainsman Park, ahead of Florida's Condren Family Ballpark, ahead of Foley Field and Sewell Thomas Stadium. The big reason for this is, I think, the fans that have really kind of shown out and bought into the program. If we were to have these ranked, I think 2-3 years ago, they would have been much, much lower on it. I really, really wanted to rank them a little bit higher as I kept coming back to that Tennessee weekend where that whole place just seemed to be rocking. And that's the feel of almost like a minor league stadium, as some of the upgrades they've had are very tasteful. I really like the concourse that you can kind of walk around in. I haven't seen this one in person, so I'm not sure if you can do a 360 or you have to leave the stadium or anything like that, but it truly is one of the best places to watch baseball in the SEC. And I don't see it mentioned a ton in kind of that upper echelon of college baseball parks in the SEC, but I think it has every right to be there. I mean, the fans go crazy there. There's a ton of gimmicks in the best kind of way possible. I love the pink hats, and I absolutely loved seeing games here at this place. Did we freeze up? Let's see. Sorry about that if we had some technical difficulties. From a uniform standpoint, I have Kentucky in at number 2, and I'd say that there's a big gap between them and Auburn. I love a lot of the looks that Kentucky kind of rocks. The only reason that they were behind Georgia is I do like red a little bit more than blue. I absolutely love their black sets. The cream I couldn't really find a good picture of, but like those Georgia creams, I think those are some of the best looks. And then truly some of their underrated looks that they wear are their gray sets. It really is, in my opinion, tough to make gray look good, but I absolutely love the vest with the black sleeves. And they wear the blue jerseys with the gray as well. A lot to like about the Kentucky uniforms. I think that they're going to stay near the top, as it really, really is kind of hard to beat that big blue. I love the Wildcat logo too as well. So I really, really like Kentucky. I'm definitely going to have to get some more Kentucky stuff. Moving on, here is kind of the schedule for Kentucky. They play at Lipscomb, which is in Nashville. They come back home for midweek. Then they return back to Nashville to play Belmont again on the road. They get home games against Hofstra and Wofford before opening up SEC play. They go at Georgia, home against Auburn, at Texas A&M, which I think is always kind of one of the toughest, more underrated road trips in the SEC, is Kentucky going to A&M or A&M going up to Kentucky. It is, I believe, the furthest distance. Actually, I think Texas has it beat now. Texas going up there will have it beat in distance, but still a tough place to go and play. Ole Miss at home, followed by Texas in between, sandwiched in that is their midweek at Louisville, where they do go west to play Louisville. That Texas series, I think, is going to be really, really enticing, as they are a new look team making that long distance journey. Texas has a little bit more experience, I think, than some of these SEC teams, as they had West Virginia, but again, still a long place to go. Then they go to Lindsey Nelson Stadium. I know that was one that definitely Tennessee had circled, because that was kind of the coming out party for Kentucky last year. That's kind of where everybody started to take them seriously, was after they took 2 of 3 from that Tennessee team. And it really, really is going to be one of the series. of the year, in my opinion, is Kentucky at Tennessee. Then they get that Louisville midweek at home, followed by South Carolina, and then a road trip to Mississippi State. Wanted to highlight that because that is the Kentucky Derby weekend. So Kentucky will be away during the Kentucky Derby, playing in the Carnegie Hall of Baseball. Then OU comes to Kentucky for the first time in school history, followed by a road series in Vanderbilt. A little bit of a weird schedule as they open their season in Nashville and then end their season in Nashville. I think that's kind of cool how they did that. They know exactly familiarity. So that Vanderbilt series, I think, is going to be one to kind of circle. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where this Kentucky team lands because they didn't draw Missouri. They did draw Ole Miss. They miss a few of their kind of SEC rivals as they miss Florida. But it is going to be really interesting to see kind of where the schedule is because there's no really soft weeks in the SEC. Moving on into the graphic that always seems to kind of get messed up, I take a screenshot from the last game. This was actually from the A&M Kentucky game that they lost, just because I know in the last one in Florida, Kentucky kind of did a lot of weird stuff when the game got out of hand. So this is kind of more up to date with their lineup at the end of the year. Ryan Waldenschmidt is gone. Emil Petrie is gone as well. Devin Burks is going to be back. I know that that's a little bit of a surprise, as we'll touch on that when we get into the roster a little bit deeper. Nick Lopez, the old man, is retiring. Him and his mustache are no longer in Kentucky. Texas transfer Mitchell Daly is another one that kind of is moving on as well. Ryan Nicholson's moving on to the major leagues. Nolan McCarthy, that one is redded out because he's still in college baseball. He obviously transferred to Georgia. James McCoy is back. Patrick Herrera is back. And then down there at the bottom, there's shortstop Smith, who was really kind of an underrated aspect of it. He is going to be gone as well. They're also replacing Friday night guy Trey Pusner, Saturday Dominic Nimmin, and Sunday guy Mason Moore, as all three of those, I believe, got drafted and are moving on to pro baseball. And if you're doing the math at home, that is 80% of their at-bats and 80% of their innings. So there's a lot of unknowns from this Kentucky Wildcat team, but I think that that's kind of where they profile as. They got a ton of underrated guys in the portal, and it really is going to be one of those interesting things where you go forward where there's not going to be a lot of guys that you really recognize, but there's a lot of guys I think have the talent to compete in the SEC. Which brings us on to the pitching aspect of it. I have them as 5th out of 6th. And I put the asterisk there because I think that they're definitely not going to be near the bottom in terms of ERA in the SEC. There's just so many unknowns with this pitching staff. There's so many different guys that are going to come in. A lot of them really don't have a ton of experience. I know Robert Hogan is back. He's kind of the inning eater for him out of that bullpen. Do they kind of stretch him out? There's just a ton of unknowns that really has me kind of near the bottom with them. But I should say that this is definitely a top 25 staff in the country. Despite being near the bottom in the SEC, I don't think that this is going to be a quote-unquote weakness for this Kentucky team. For me, there's just too many unknowns. Moving on to who I project will kind of be in the mix for their rotation. Scott Rouse, the Radford transfer coming over. He's who I think could kind of be a Friday night guy going forward. I think he reminds me a ton of Trey Pusner, not in the sense of how he pitched, but he's just a completely unknown guy. From what I've heard from the fall stuff, he looked great. The stuff is really there. Adam Hackman coming over from Arkansas. I know that he kind of dealt with a little bit of an injury there. From what I've heard from them is that he kind of is on track and they expect him to pitch a ton of innings for this team. If he's healthy and there's no complications for that, I expect him to be in the mix for the rotation. Ethan Walker is another one that I kind of expect to be in the mix for there. And then Nick McKay, I think, is the perfect example that kind of exemplifies what Mingione's built at Kentucky. He is a 5th-year starter from South Dakota State. Way back in 2019, he was a second-team All-Summit, freshman All-American, according to D1 Baseball in 2019. Didn't pitch at all in 2020 or 2021 from Tommy John surgery. When I read an article about it, it said that he had a ton of complications just simply finding a surgeon that could see him during COVID. So it really kind of did mess up his timeline for that. And it really kind of doesn't put into perspective how long this guy has been around college baseball. That his Tommy John surgery kind of got messed up by COVID. And then he didn't pitch at all in 2023 as he pitched in 2022 as he had some complications. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Kentucky uses him. It really is kind of a last ride for him. He's a guy that's just battled adversity every step of the way. And he's one that I really kind of want to put on my Jake's root list as it really kind of is hard to root against somebody who had so many complications, has had so many roadblocks placed in front of him, and now he's going on to pitch at an SEC school and likely in an SEC rotation. I mean, it's just crazy that that's where college baseball, and I mean, you talk about a guy that's seen college baseball change over the last 5 years. It's just really, really kind of crazy to see kind of how they use him. And again, they have a ton of bullpen arms too as well. So it is going to be an underrated bullpen. I think it's going to be a bullpen a lot like last year, where there's not going to be one guy that sits at the back of the rotation that everybody knows is going to come into the game. But it's going to be a ton of guys that can get outs, a ton of guys that throw strikes, it's a ton of guys that I think are going to improve under the system, because Kentucky has shown the proven track record that they can take these kind of no-name guys, if you will, and build them up and coach them up and recruit them and really do tremendous wonders. They remind me a lot of the Virginia staff from last year. Obviously, Virginia is a team that ended up in Omaha, so it'll be interesting to see kind of where they do that. But that's kind of the one that I see for this team. I don't think that they hit as good as that Virginia team, but from a pitching staff standpoint, that's kind of who I profiled them as, is Virginia from a few years ago. The projected lineup, I can be honest with you, there was a ton of guys that are just in the mix for stuff, so I didn't want to put in a ton of pictures for them. We can start kind of at the top of it, just in go in order of their last scrimmage, because I think that this is going to be pretty similar to how they kind of go out there. Leading off, they had Luke Lawrence, an Indiana State transfer, coming over. He was their leadoff hitter. I watched them play against a Northwestern team last year in some of my prep for this. He has a tremendous, tremendous swing. Bats from the left-handed side. He had a 33-game on-base streak, 15 of 19 stolen bases. On the one that I saw, too, he tagged from second on a ball that was medium deep, really being aggressive. I think he's going to be a table setter at the top of this Kentucky lineup. The bat, I think, is going to play a little bit. He's going to find a lot of gaps in this big Kentucky Proud Park, and it really wouldn't surprise me to see him kind of break onto the scene here in the SEC, as he is truly an underrated bat for him. Will Marcy is going to bat second, and they have him in center field. If you remember correctly, he played at NC State in 22 and 23. I got to see him last year at Memphis with Memphis played Rice. He also is a big stolen base guy. He's 19 of 23, and he's also been hit by 16 pitches, which, by the way, I love the Kentucky SID and the Kentucky media page that they're mentioning these stats from other ones that fit into this Kentucky system. There's a lot of guys that you think are going to learn how to play Kentucky baseball. Luke Lawrence and Will Marcy, I think, are not going to be the two of those guys that you really are have to learn that brand of Kentucky baseball. He does have some good righty pop. Again, when I saw him at Memphis, he really kind of drove the ball well. There's a lot to like, too, about him. And again, very, very fast guy. Moving on to the first baseman, which ironically, according to their Twitter, it is his birthday. Dylan Kuntz is going to play first. In the fall scrimmage, he went 1 for 2 with a home run and a walk. 2 RBIs. He's a prep shortstop, but when I talked to one of the recruiting coordinators, he kind of laughed at that. He can play third. He can play first. He is a Campbell transfer coming over. Batted .433 with 33 runs, 6 doubles, a triple, and 8 home runs, and only 87 bats in the summer. I think that that's going to be kind of a good sample size of where you see him going forward. He only hit 6 home runs at Campbell, but I don't know if Kentucky's found some kind of secret sauce or he's unlocked some kind of new power or new something in his swing. I think he's definitely going to hit more than 6 home runs than he saw at Campbell. The bat, from what you saw with him at Campbell, and again, it was really kind of hard to find Campbell games, as a lot of the ones that were online he didn't really play in. He's a guy that started a ton of games for him in conference play. Unfortunately, Campbell doesn't put a ton on conference play. But the stuff I saw from the summer, I mean, it is an unreal swing, and I think it's going to be one that he's going to have a little bit more power than the guy that he's replacing. Moving on is Patrick Carrera playing third. It's going to be his third year with Kentucky. It really is kind of unheard of that somebody like him, quote unquote, third year in a program, hasn't really played a ton, is sticking around. It's definitely a throwback type of guy, just sticking it around that aspect. He's a guy that's waited his turn. They've recruited a few guys around him. Obviously, Mitchell Daly is going to be the guy that he's replacing, transferred over. I think that this speaks to the program that Kentucky's kind of building, that you have guys that sat behind for 2 years that are now in their third year that are ready to kind of take on that moment. You know, there's a lot of programs where guys like this transfer out. I mean, we've seen it at numerous ones throughout the show, that freshmen that don't start immediately transfer out. That's not going to be Patrick Carrera. And he's slated to be a middle of the order guy for him. Again, I really like him. He can play just about anywhere. He can play third, left, right. He DH'd for him last year. Obviously, he pinch ran in the game against A&M last year. A lot of versatility, and I think that it's just about finding him the right spot going forward. But again, there's a lot to like about him. Batting fifth was Sean Montoya, coming over from San Diego State. Played in 148 games for the Aztecs, starting 143 of them over 3 years. So he is going to be that mature senior bat that it seems like every single coach in the country wants. He's a guy that's played in a lot of these kind of bigger ballparks, so he knows how to hit. Recorded 166 hits while batting 306 for him. Big doubles guys. He had 27 doubles, only 5 home runs, which again, in the Mountain West, they play in a lot of these high altitude parks. So expect kind of those home run numbers to probably be about 2 or 3. Expect him to be kind of a gap-to-gap hitter going forward. He also is a big walk guy, as he walked 60 times for him last year and then stole 31 bases over the course of his career. Definitely another Kentucky guy, another one of those guys that we've talked about numerous times on the show that is a center fielder that can play other positions in the outfield. He's going to be an absolute speedster, and I'm really curious to see how Kentucky uses him, because it seems like that 5 hole is almost going to be like a second leadoff spot for him, which again, I think is another kind of throwback type of thing. Moving on to their 6 hole is Cole Hage, coming over from Columbia. So another kind of Ivy League bat that's taking the marks into the premier conference, like Hayden Schott did last year, like Jackson Appel, like a ton of guys in the ACC on our ACC preview show. He is a 3-time member of the All Ivy League Conference and has played in, as it started in 176 games. Another mature senior bat that knows his way around the plate. It's a career 331 hitter with 33 doubles and 26 home runs and 102 RBIs over 3 seasons. And again, he's another steal guy. 24 steals and 33 attempts, along with 40 hit by pitches. Again, I just absolutely love that that's what Kentucky adds to their pages. He's going to be the guy that really kind of you can pencil in as being a gap-to-gap doubles guy. He's a high contact guy. I know that Kentucky kind of really falls in love with that. They just seem to never strike out. It seems like the guys that kind of get in those slumps where they strike out, they get somebody else in there. Kentucky is fit to put the ball in play, and Cole Hage, I think, is another guy that fits this system. Moving on to probably, I think, their only freshman that's going to start. Tyler Bell's coming over. He is the second highest player to ever make it to Kentucky. He was a draft guy, as he was the 81st ranked prospect for him. He was drafted 66 overall. Ironically, because they didn't sign him, they really could take an overslot position in Emilio Petrie, who was second base at Kentucky. So it's kind of ironic that the guy that he's kind of replacing in terms of the lineup ended up getting drafted to where he was with the White Sox, because he kind of turned them down. He can play anywhere, but he's definitely going to be an everyday shortstop for them. He's going to be an everyday shortstop, I think, at the big league level too as well. He's a switch hitter, and that is glove first. When he takes ground balls up the middle from some of the perfect game stuff, you can tell he definitely has spent a lot of time working on his footwork, as he has really advanced footwork from his age. When I talked to some of the coaches at Kentucky, they said that he just basically lives at the cage. He reminds me a ton of like an Alex Bregman. I know a lot of the scouting stuff that's said on Perfect Game, and some of the scouting stuff that I read about him in MLB, said that he really kind of disappeared at times against elite pitching. And that was kind of the one knock on him, is that he really didn't show out a lot in these showcases. From what the coaches have told me, that does not appear to be the case at the fall, as he was their number 1 average hitter. The only thing that I kind of caution Kentucky fans with him is, he is a glove first guy. That is his tool, is his glove in his arm. And when a lot of Kentucky fans see these kind of rankings with him, you almost think of him as kind of going to be a savior of the program, like a Jay Slavolette, a Gavin Grahovic, Max Ballou at Texas, where he's going to hit 350, SEC All-American. He's going to break these numerous records. I'm not saying that that's not going to be him, but don't be surprised if he kind of takes his lumps early in SEC play. But I think he's going to be one where down the road, as he kind of matures, he is Kentucky's best hitter on paper. I think he's going to get a lot of meaningful at-bats from him. And if he takes some of his lumps early, I think that that's kind of going to come with the territory, as it seems like every single freshman has a quote-unquote freshman moment. But he's a guy that has the talent to be an all-SEC shortstop. I think you can almost kind of pencil him in to be the freshman All-American shortstop, as I don't know how many of those we'll see. but he has the talent, I think, to be one of the greats at Kentucky. He is a draft eligible sophomore going forward, as he is a little bit of an older guy. He turned down big money at the major league level. He's going to be the Kentucky shortstop as he started both games for them. I'm really excited to see the future for Tyler Bell in this Kentucky program, because they really have relied on a lot of these transfers, and getting somebody like him that's going to be able to play early, I think will pay dividends for them. DH is, I think, a little bit up in the air, as Ethan Hindle DH'd for him last year. He only played 4 games for him, but in the summer he led the team in home runs and stolen bases. 2023 summer All-Star 2 as well for him. Good pop from his perfect game stuff. He had a 6.7 60. So a rare kind of quote-unquote 5-tool guy, if you will. There's not too many guys in the country that have 6.7 60-yard dashes and 100 exit velos. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Kentucky uses him. Eli Small is another one. He was a prep catcher that I think has a chance to kind of push for an outfield spot. Played for the Lincoln Potters, the Pacific Empire League. He hit 304 with them. 14 RBIs. Again, big walk guy. I think he's another one that you really could kind of see being in the lineup too, as well, as he kind of pushes for playing time. Obviously behind the plates, Devin Burks. He didn't bat in kind of the fall stuff, but he's been an absolute mainstay and the Kentucky backstop. I know that there was a lot of talk about him getting drafted or him kind of signing undrafted. That didn't happen. I know that sometimes you can have these guys that kind of sit and sulk. That does not appear to be him at all. He's kind of ready to go. I think one of the coaches said it. He's like, well, he goes, I guess we're going to have to go back to Omaha. And I just absolutely love that mindset from him going forward, that he really kind of is here to grind. Because I know being a senior that expected to be drafted, it really is kind of a tough position for him. So I'm excited to kind of see what he does and how he kind of attacks that. A few other guys that I think are in the mix too as well is Carson Hansen. He is a Horizon All-League first team for him last year. He really kind of hasn't played a ton for him, but he absolutely raked up at the University of Milwaukee. I think he's another guy that you could kind of talk in that outfield conversation. I don't know how Kentucky's going to use him. And then Rafe Pelletier coming over from Kansas State, all Big 12 catcher, has an absolute cannon for an arm, really manages a staff. I know that when I got to talk to Kansas State last year, every pitcher thanked him in the interviews that I did with them. Everyone talked about the experience that he had. He definitely is a glove first, as he only hit 218 for Kansas State. It'll be interesting to see kind of how him and Burks fit into it, because Burks started every single game catching for Kentucky last year, got really, really banged up near the end as he had some hamstring issues. And then, like I said, in the fall, he hasn't taken any at-bats. He's just kind of managed the staff. I think Pelletier will be one of the guys that takes some of that load off of him. Do they move Burks to first? Do they move Burks to DH? That'll be interesting to see. Like I said, I think both of these guys will be tremendous, tremendous catchers, and it really is rare that Kentucky gets 2 elite glove-first guys to campus. And it really is a credit to all the staff that they have in, that they could get somebody like Rafe in, and Burks is welcome to come back to as well. That's the other thing, is that you didn't even hear any rumors about Burks going to the portal or Rafe reportaling or anything like that. So it'll be interesting to see. As we kind of wrap up fall ball, based on their website, I believe they need to make 8 cuts to it. So their roster is still a little bit up in the air too as well for guys, as they need to get down to that 34 limit. But there's a lot to like about this Kentucky lineup. Like I said, they're replacing 80% of their at-bats, 7 of their 9 starters. But there's a lot to like on this. And I think that you can almost kind of pencil in one of these guys will be an SEC selection. If you're going to make me kind of do a gambling pick on this, I think it definitely has to be Luke Lawrence. I think he's going to be either a first or second team all SEC going forward. And I'm really excited to see where this Kentucky team goes. Did we get another freeze? I think we did get another freeze. So for those that are watching the video on Spotify, I do apologize for that going forward. See if I can kind of reset it. Where we kind of rank these SEC teams, I have Kentucky as 4th. They're above, I think, a really, really talented Auburn team. They are below an uber talented Georgia team. I think that they're kind of going to fall into that second tier of SEC teams where they have the talent to, I think, break into that first tier. But those SEC teams at the top, I think, are just so loaded. If they can finish above Auburn, I think Auburn's going to have a bounce back year. Kentucky is going to be in a tremendous, tremendous spot going forward. Like I said, they're going to be 4th. I think that's kind of where they're going to rank, and a lot of teams will go in behind them. Here is kind of the bell curve for Kentucky. And like their lineup, like their pitching staff, I really do kind of have them all over the place. We'll start kind of with the low end, everything goes bad territory. They missed the tournament. I think that they are bringing in so many new guys that it really isn't unfathomable that they're going to miss the tournament. I doubt that they'll miss the tournament just because of that guy that I have pictured there in the top right. But, nightmare scenarios, I think that they do kind of lack a little bit of the depth that some of these SEC teams have. I think that they're going to be close in every single one of their games. And if they get a little bit of a bad luck, like in Auburn last year, they could kind of have that. Where I think they kind of more fit in is in that SEC bye range, kind of in that 6 to 10 range, which I think will have them as a 2 seed somewhere and being a very, very dangerous 2 seed. That's where I kind of see them truly fitting in. They trust their system. They recruit their system. They have tremendous coaching staff that gets the most out of their system. Speed never slumps, it seems like. Taking walks never slumps. Hitting and running is one of those ones that you really have to be in a deep slump if you're not doing hit and run wells. They bunt tremendously well. If you're going to make me do a real guarantee, I can guarantee that Kentucky leads the SEC in sack bunts, bunt and runs, hit and runs, that kind of stuff. And a lot of SEC teams, as we saw last year, if you put the ball in play enough and you put pressure on them, like a lot of them will fail. And Kentucky can kind of be there standing at the end looking around going, how the hell did they win this game? And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters is Kentucky winning these games. Obviously, on the far right team, they're a team that went to Omaha last year with a very similar makeup. So I think that they do have the talent to be in Omaha. I think of the kind of 10 to 12 teams that I said in the pre-show that could make Omaha. I definitely have Kentucky kind of in that one. I do see a world where they have last year where, they get really hot at the right time. They're pitching. They get everything that they can out of their pitching like they did last year. The lineup hits the way that it does last year. This really is an Omaha team. It wouldn't shock me at the end of the day to see them in Omaha. Final thoughts on Kentucky, as it is one of the most confusing teams to kind of preview. I had to look at a ton of fall stuff for them, a ton of transfer stuff. They brought in 16 new pitchers between the transfer portal and the 2024 recruiting class. They sit at 43 on the roster, as I just looked at my notes again, so they have to cut 9. This really is going to be a revamped pitching staff. Obviously, Robert Hogan, I think he's going to play a big key in this. How long does it kind of take this pitching staff to click? Will be the tail of this Kentucky team. I know that last year they really kind of struggled early. Obviously, it didn't matter because, they're pulling all the right strings down the stretch, and they were ending as one of the final 6 teams in Omaha. They got on a really, really tough side of the bracket as they had to play Florida twice and really just kind of ran out of pitching. And what do? They go and reload in the portal. Like I said, Luke Lawrence is a bona fide star for this league going forward. And then Dylan Coots for Campbell coming over gives them the power bat that I think that they desperately needed last year. As I know, Nicky Lopez was another guy. Mitchell Daly had it. But I think Trey Pusner has the potential to lead this team in home runs and kind of be a 15 home run guy, which at Kentucky Proud Park, it seems like it's going to be a 1.5. So there's a lot to like about this Kentucky team going forward as he absolutely mashes. And again, trust the process with Kentucky. I know that all the LSU fans last year said, trust Jay, and we gave them a whole bunch of crap about it. That's what you need to do with this Kentucky team. There isn't a ton of on-paper talent. They're not getting the guys that took these big NIL deals, leaving ACC teams or mid-majors teams. They got guys that fit into the Kentucky system, and I'm excited to see what they do. This was definitely one of the longer shows going forward as we're approaching that 30-minute mark. I think that this is where we're going to kind of start living going forward. Thanks again for tuning in for this one. I'll go ahead and get the graphics up going forward. I believe it is Missouri next week, either Missouri or Mississippi State, one of those M's, but I'll go ahead and keep those updated. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see everybody next week.